Well, how is everyone today? We're going to wait a couple minutes to make sure that our attendees get in and are able to listen to our program today. I'll introduce her in just a minute. Watching people jump in, we have a good audience with us this afternoon. I'm really going to be engaged with the topic. I'm excited to hear more about it. Okay, so great. Well, good afternoon and welcome to Smithsonian Gardens webinar, Let's Talk Gardens. My name is Cindy Brown. I am the Education Manager here at Smithsonian Gardens. And as always, we ask you to put your questions in the chat box. And after the speaker finishes with the presentation, we will go back to your questions and we will ask as many as possible. If there's any extra, you can always email me, or our speaker is providing her email address with us on the last slide, so you can contact her as well. So today we have, and she's going to roll her eyeballs at me because I cannot pronounce last names very well. So Nadia Navarette-Tindall, thank you so much for joining us. And this is a presentation I've been looking forward to because as a horticulturist, my specialty is edible plants and edible landscaping. So to be able to have someone come in and let me know what's going on in the edible world for crops and for native plants that you can grow at home, or she'll tell us more about other ways to be able to get them. So Nadia, why don't you go ahead and start on growing, gathering, and cooking with native plants. We're looking forward to hear more. I'll disappear, but I'll be here in the background. See you in a bit.
Okay, well, thank you very much for the invitation to present at your series of webinars, Cindy. I'm very happy to be here, and thanks everyone for joining us today. I'm a native plant specialist working for Lincoln University in Missouri. And we are, I'm gonna, as she says, I will be sharing my contact information if you have any questions. I just wanna get you started with a beautiful plant that you might not even know that is edible. I just found out recently that the leaves are edible and it could be used as a ground cover. Showy primrose. I'm at Lincoln University. I run a program that is called Specialty Crops, and we do focus on native plants. We promote the use of them, not just for food, but also for the importance in conservation, especially for pollinators. And one thing that one of the reasons that we are using native plants as a specialty crop, so I'm trying to promote them, is because they all seem to have more resilience than introduced species. We'll talk about what the difference is between a native and an introduced species in a couple minutes. And I just want to share that plants, they're resilient because they can adapt to changes of the environment, sometimes to the very harsh weather and the harsh changes that are happening now. My contact information is Navarette-Tindall, and is my email at lincolnu.edu. And also you can contact me at my Native Plants and More Facebook page. You can send me a message or an email. Lincoln University is actually an HBCU university, or historically Black university. It's one of 17 in the country. And I just want to show you on the right where we are located. If you can see, Jefferson City is right at the center of Missouri. We are surrounded by 7 states. So when we talk about the plants that are native to Missouri, they're usually widely distributed and they can grow in our surrounding states. And I don't know how many of you are from the Midwest or how many are from the East Coast. I may mention that we have a diversity of representations here from different states. So I would love it if you tell us in your chat where you're from. I'll try to cover everything for everybody. I usually do a disclaimer before I talk about native edibles, just to be sure that you know your plants before you eat them. Talk to your neighbor, talk to someone that you know that knows, and if you are in doubt. And also be aware that they can they can have allergic reaction or to you if you have never eaten them. And about what a native plant, an introduced plant is. Native, a native plant is usually, we refer to plants that have been grown naturally in a particular area. In Missouri, we try to grow plants that the seed have been collected in Missouri and maybe surrounding states if the seed is not available. We try not to use plants that came from Florida, for example, because they might not get established or they might not grow as well as the ones that grow in our regions. And an introduced plant is one that has been brought on purpose from, according to the Natural Resources Conservation Service. It are the plants that were brought after, or they were found after European settlement. But we keep having plants being introduced all the time, and maybe many of you are aware that they might become invasive. So we have to be aware of that. And I always like to also mention this: should we gather or should we grow them? Because our goal is that you learn to grow them. Of course, that would be my first choice, grow them. But there are exceptions. For example, persimmon is very common in our state and across the states. So it's okay to collect the fruits. But you have to be aware if you do it from a private land or public lands. In Missouri, most of the places you can gather plants for food, but you cannot pull plants. You can gather the piece that is edible. So, for example, wild leeks or ramps, they have been extirpated from areas because people were not, but they were not aware they were really destroying a population by digging them. So, and there are places where you cannot do it anymore. So for that reason, we're trying to grow our own here at Lincoln University. So what do you eat from your native edibles? We have so many options. Right, just in Missouri, we have 2,000 species, more than 2,000 species that are native. There are many, many, many that are edible. We never finish learning. We keep learning. Like just before we started talking, we were practicing with Cindy, and she asked me about one of the species that is hog peanut, that is a legume, if I had tried it. And the truth is that I have read about it, but we haven't eaten it yet. All these plants that are represented here, poke, elderberry, and tubers from arrowhead, and wild plum, we do have tried them. So that's what I'm gonna do today. I'm gonna talk about the plants that we have more experience with, and of course, we don't have too much time to talk about so many. So first, let's get started with wild plum. This is a tree that is growing in the front yard of our house. You see, it's really a beautiful tree in the spring. And this is a fully mature plant, probably has about 15 years in our yard. And here, the one on the left is a plant it's a wild plant that we grew at Lincoln University. At Lincoln, we have 2 demonstration areas on campus. One that we call Finca Eco Farm, It's where we grow all these fruits, and about 90% of the plants that we have planted are native. Not only edibles, but also many of them are for other purposes, like for floral arrangements, for example, or as cut flowers. So we have wild plum in the spring, provides food for pollinators. Then we have in the fall, like starting in August through September, we have the fruits maturing, and it's when we gather them and we collected them directly from the tree before they fall in the ground to avoid damage from insects. Wild plum is really widely distributed in this country. Everything in green you find naturally wild plums, but it is true that not too many people eat it, and that happens in Missouri. Just to share with you what we do with the plums, if we have time to process them, we go ahead and we do the like in this case, we boil the plums, and then with water, and then we separate the juice and prepare drink syrups or jellies, and we save the fruits with the skin for another recipe that I'll share in a minute. If you don't have time to do this immediately, just freeze them. They will be just fine, and you might not even need to boil them to separate the juice. This is just an example of what we do with the juice. This is really, as you can see, if you are thirsty, and that this would be so refreshing. I add a little sugar. Some of my colleagues don't like to add sugar. They like it tart, but I do like a little sweet in this drink. And it's similar to a lemonade, like a pink lemonade. I call it plumade, thinking about lemonade. And with the fruit that we save from boiling them, we pass them through a food processor to make leather. And you have to produce a really thick pulp so you can use it. I mean, it's much easier when it's thick. You don't need to add water. So you can use the dehydrator to make your leather. You can add sugar if you want, or you can make it tart. I think this would be a fun project for to do with children, because I know children like tart candy. What a better way to eat fruit for a kid. And another way to do it is I use it in an oven. My oven only goes down to 170 degrees Fahrenheit. But if I had it lower, I would use down to 120. And it takes about 3 to 4 hours to dehydrate. Then you can store at room temperature. And I have tried to freeze them and then defrost, and they still have the same texture. These are really delicious. And we have been very successful to share with our participants during workshops. This is just a picture of the wild plum that I like to prepare. Jam in sauce. Those both are really delicious. You can use the sauce on pancakes. And of course, your jam or sauce can go in a batter toast. It's very, very flavorful. Another group of plants that I like to talk about that are not used very much are the sumacs. Across the states, we have different species. In Missouri, we have 3 that are native, so I will talk about them. First one is winged sumac. In the spring, excuse me a second, they produce beautiful flowers, and they are attractive for pollinators. We have seen carpenter bees and bumblebees visiting the flowers as well, and a variety of pollinators. And one important thing about winged sumac to separate from the next one I'm going to show you is that the compound leaves are winged. That's where the common name comes from. And this is your panicle ready to be harvested in late summer to early fall. Harvested for your recipes before heavy rains. Otherwise, they will be washed. The flavor will be gone. And this is just to show you how widely distributed this sumac is. The second sumac is smooth. It also has a wide range of distribution, and you can tell that some similarities with the previous one. And they both have different flavors, but they are both produce a tart tea. And the third one, the first two are they form thickets, and they're large. They're like tall shrubs. While a fragrant sumac is much shorter. It has been selected in the landscaping trade. So you might find it in areas planted on its own, forming hedges. And the fruits are also edible. And similarly, the flowers are visited by all kinds of pollinators in the spring. This one is more widely distributed. And this is what we do. We collect the fruits, then we prepare a concentrated tea by steeping the berries in water. And you have to do your own because I like tartness. I'm originally from El Salvador. And for me, this is heaven because I love tartness. I love lemon in all my recipes. And my husband always teases me about it. But so this is right, like a tropical flavor to me. So what we do with the juice one, well, we strain the seeds or the little berries, the tiny fruits, and we use it to prepare jelly, which is really good on pancakes. And we also prepare a drink, and this is just a recipe for you, just to try it. You might need to add more fruits per water. And one important thing, you have to steep the seed or the fruit with the red fruits in cold water, not hot water. It might become bitter if you do that. And the next fruit I have is pawpaw. Pawpaw is I think it's becoming very known across the states. Of course, in the past, it was food for Native Americans. And the flowers are also show in the spring, and they are very attractive for flies. They smell like rotten meat. Of course, flies like that. And they're the fruits are edible, of course, and they're the largest fruit in North America. This is the only member of the Annonaceae family that is a tropical species that is found in the temperate regions. So you eat it fresh, or you use to prepare ice cream and desserts. But the same thing, if you cannot process it immediately, you can freeze it and then use it later. Of course, you have to compete with raccoons and possums and other little creatures that are in your yard. This is on the right, you can see one of the pawpaws we have in our yard. This one produces, and the one in the front I'll show you later is it just serves for pollination. So be sure you have at least 2 trees in your yard for cross-pollination, just a view of the fruits when they are mature. And you can gather them in late fall to sometimes early winter. But last year in Missouri, they started maturing early because the weather was hotter than usual. And this is where you can find it naturally. You can find them in the understory of woodlands. We have Lawson where we live in Missouri. This is right across the corner from us. And on the right, the bottom right, you can see my little pawpaw tree in the fall. And this is the pollinates with the other one I show you. It has a wide range of distribution based on the map that I'm showing you. One important thing about pawpaws is that they are the host plant for the zebra swallowtail butterfly caterpillar. And if you don't care about the fruit, grow it for the butterflies. It's just an amazing sight. And these pictures were taken by my husband, Navarette-Tindall. We found them in our backyard. So it's really fun to have that in your own yard. We do see them at Lincoln University too. The next fruit, persimmon. I'm sure many of you are very familiar with persimmon, but again, it's just a way to motivate you to use it. Many people get discouraged because the seed is too big and then it's just hard to get the pulp, but for me, it's fun. And what happened, I'll show you what I do with the leftover seed. You still have some pulp in the seed. And this is just a way to, in this photo on the right, you can see the characteristic bark of a persimmon tree. This could be a very old tree, 30 to 40 years. It depends on the location. They might be very thin, or some might develop larger stems. It is a host plant for regal and Luna moss. So that's another interesting fact about persimmons. They're found naturally in bottomlands, and you can find them in fence rows. People allow them to grow, and in open fields. They can be very abundant, and we find that in Missouri. And these are the fruits that we harvested last year, right from in front of our office. We have what we call a native plant outdoor laboratory, where we have about 100 species of native plants. And one of them is persimmon. This one greets the visitors. On both sides of the entrance, we have a female plant, a tree with female flowers. And on the other side, we have the male flower tree. And that is just a reminder that persimmons are dioecious, which means that the flowers are present in the female flowers are in separate trees from the male flower. And in order to be sure you have production, either grow them from cuttings, or maybe you can find in your area someone that grafts them. When to harvest? From September to October. Again, depending on the weather. The temperature might produce the trees. They might make the fruits mature faster. And it depends on your region, of course. And what you do to store them, same thing. If you can process them, get the pulp immediately, and then you can save the pulp frozen. Otherwise, you just freeze the fruits and process later. Remember what I told you what I do with the leftover pulp from the seed? My husband likes to make persimmon wine. I hope that he does it again, because he did it once and it was really tasty. I really like it. And also another way to preserve the fruit is by dehydrating, and you can eat later. It stores really well. And what about making persimmon cookies? Of course, they're really tasty. We have a recipe that we are sharing with you in an article, and Cindy will let you know how you can have access to it. Otherwise, you can send me an email, and I can send you the recipe. I want to just briefly talk about elderberry, because everybody's talking about elderberry, because the medicinal value of elderberry has a big demand in Missouri. We grow them in fence rows naturally. You find it's funny because people are really happy that they're growing their plants, and sometimes they have it already in their own backyard. And this is just an example of how you can grow elderberry in your yard, maybe creating a private fence, and they can be very productive. The flowers are good for pollinators again in the spring. And then you can make wonderful things like this kombucha drink that I have on the left. Widely distributed is the common elderberry, or Sambucus canadensis. Now, this is the last one of my fruits. And I just want to make an emphasis because sometimes when we refer to acorns, we talk like they are nuts. And they are considered nuts, but they are also fruits. So for what I do with this, I'm actually sharing an article with you, and is a website that you can access where you can find the information. So I just go briefly through these. I prefer to use bur oak because it has the largest acorns, and also because it's one of the sweetest. And between red oaks and white oaks, I would choose white oaks because they have less tannins. They have to go through a process to be used for us to replace nuts or to make flowers. And just one thing, I just wanted to be sure that you, I wrote it because I wanted to remember that Dr. Doug Tallamy in her book about oaks, he mentions that about 900 species of Lepidoptera feed on oaks. So let's grow more oaks. And white oaks are okay. So this is what I do. To remove the tannins from after they are minced, we leach the acorns. And this is how, just to illustrate the changes of water. I have 5 here. In this case, I did 5 water changes. I tasted my acorns and they were very sweet. And then I proceeded to make grind them and make flour with them. Sometimes they're still a little wet, so I dehydrate the flour and then I save it in the refrigerator, and it saves really well. One recipe that I'm sharing also in this website is what I call a sweet cheese bread. As I'd like to immerse my 2 cultures. I'd like to use my own recipes from my own country, El Salvador, and use the ingredients that I have on hand here. So what I did with this recipe, I added acorn flour, has a really nutty flavor and very tasty. So I hope that you can try it. And you can make your own acorn flour. Now let's move to herbaceous plants. Again, I will show just a few of them. Let me start where we have poke salad. I just want to show you how the plant looks like. We won't talk too much about this one today. Instead, I want to talk about one that we have been working for years, Golden Glow or Socham. This is a member, it's actually related to Black-eyed Susans, but this plant grows in woodlands, so you can grow it in the shade. It likes really good soil, nutritious soil or with organic matter. The flowers bloom in the fall, and they are pollinated by bees. The distribution is very wide. It has been used in landscaping, but the flowers have been selected that don't produce any pollen or nectar. So don't plant those, plant the natives that can feed the pollinators. So what do we eat out of Golden Glow? The leaves are edible. These plants, this picture was taken in April, is how they look in our area. So the best time to harvest is between March and June. Pretty soon, in June, mid-June, they start forming the inflorescence, which can reach up to 3 to 4 feet. So by then, the leaves might be a little too harsh. So what you can do, save your harvest. Eat some in the spring, but if you want to save some for later, you can blanch the leaves for 5 minutes, and then you can put them in the refrigerator. You can also dry them, and I grind them. I use them for soups. Another plant that is that we have used a lot here We have an event that we call Dining Wild at Lincoln University. We serve recipes with at least one native plant ingredient. So we have cut plant that is, it is more widespread than the previous one, both in the sunflower family, and they grow also in the shade. But they are really, really adaptable. They're really good for pollinators and monarch butterflies that come to our yard. Love them. And here is how the leaves look like in early spring when you can gather. And you can do the same preparation as I show you for Golden Glow. The distribution is a little less, well, it seemed to me that it's pretty highly distributed, so hopefully it's in your area. If you don't have it, I'm sure that you can find it from local nurseries. And this is just a recipe. I don't think I am sharing this recipe, but if you want it, please let me know and I will share it with you. And this is just, it's like we use a quiche recipe, and we, instead of spinach, we use cut plant and glazed onion. And glazed onion is the little flowers that you see on top. Beautiful. Our next green, and actually all these greens that I'm talking about, they're part of a project that we have coming this year. We have been granted some funding from the Department of Agriculture locally. So we are gonna try to increase their growth by farmers and maybe potential farmers. So we have 2 nettles in Missouri. Stinging nettle is a woodland species, and wood nettle is also a woodland species, but they are stinging nettle is considered non-native. It's more naturalized around the world. I actually found it in my own country. And wood nettle is less common, but you can see it growing naturally here with ramps or white leeks. This picture was taken in a woodland here in Columbia, Missouri. Just to, as a warning, I put this close just so I can remember to let you know that if you want to gather these plants, you have to use gloves. I made a mistake once and I learned my lesson. Our next recipe is nettles with white leek soup. And you can adapt any spinach soup recipe instead using nettles. And with white leeks, it's really to die for. It was one of our best recipes during our Dining Wild events. And well, this is, again, I like to immerse my 2 cultures. I want to mix them. I don't know if some of you are familiar with Salvadorian pupusas. This is a special dish. You know, Salvador is a treat for us. And wherever we go, I'm looking for pupusas. So what I do is I adapt my recipes, which is just corn flour tortilla with a little bit of salt. It's the same way you prepare tortillas, and you fill them with a mix of greens. In this case, I use nettles, cut plants, and white leeks. They were really very tasty, savory. Our next plant is glazed onion. I realize that this plant is not native to the East Coast or the Eastern states, but I'm sure that you have other wild onions that grow in your area. These ones are really, really productive in the fall, and we like to gather mostly the flowers. We don't gather the bulb because they're too small, and we love them because they are really attractive for pollinators. Where you can see here, this is a little sweat bee. So you can imagine how tiny this sweat bee is. And it is a native plant in prairies and glades. in our region. We use it also in recipes just to enhance the flavor of the salads and to make it look pretty, like this salad. Now we have wild rams or wild leeks. I'm sure you know, some of you might know these plants in your region, and they're woodland species, and they can be found growing with violets. The leaves disappear in the spring, late spring, and then the blooms start in July. They're just a beautiful sight. And the seed is produced in the fall. And at Lincoln, we had a grant where we evaluated these plants and we were trying to promote them among farmers. They can be grown from seed as well as from dividing plants. We're lucky to have a nursery in our region that provides that service. And this is just to show you these wild leeks growing in raised beds, and you can do that in your own yard. And the ratio distribution is pretty large. And another idea what to do with your rams. I usually promote among people to collect the leaves, not the bulbs, but these ones, we use them because we found a source in our area. And another recipe, just another idea, just mix wild leek leaves with your potato, and they're really delicious. Our next plant is Fermented Mint. We have many mints in our region, but I just mentioned these and we use it similarly. Fermented Mint can grow up to 3 feet, and we use the leaves and the flowers. They are very aromatic, and we use them to flavor desserts like this recipe for cheesecake. And we also use them to prepare a mint tea. And you have to sip it, and this is okay to do it in with hot water so you can get faster results. This is how your tea looks like. Tea with dry leaves on the left and with fresh leaves on the right. Another plant that I love, not only because it's really tasty, but because it's beautiful, lead plant. This is a nitrogen fixing legume, and it really makes a nice addition in gardens. And then you can gather the leaves for tea. You can dehydrate the leaves and use them to make a nice tea. And this is just illustrates what we do also in events, during our dining while events. At Lincoln, we have prepared these teas, lead plant, mountain mint, and sumac teas, and they are always received well. One more species. This one actually it has a fruit that is edible, but the leaves too. So as the name suggests, this is a plant that is very aromatic, grows in the understory of woodlands. And you can use the leaves for tea to make a really nice tea, and the berries to grind it and make a spice. Just so if you can look, you can follow my arrow here, the folding leaves, we have our little residents, and I'll show you a picture of them in the next slide. But before, I just want to mention that this plant is also dioecious. The male and female flowers are in separate plants. So this is what we do with the dried leaves. We also use the dehydrator and save them in jars for tea. And the spice bush, we dry the spice, the little berries, and and we grind it with a coffee grinder. One recipe I like to share is how to make a spice bush syrup. Simple. You can use it for cordials or in other drinks. And a member of that is really a relative of spice bush is sassafras. I know it hasn't been grown too much because some people are afraid of being toxic, but there's only one study that shows that. And if you eat it in moderation, it should be okay. This is a relative, actually spice bush and sassafras are relatives of avocado. They're in the avocado family. You can find minced sassafras roots commercially, and you can use it to make tea, or you can gather your own if you have a sassafras tree in your area, and a little piece of root will go for a while. And this is the little creature I was talking about that was in those folding leaves. This is our spice bush swallowtail caterpillar. There's really immensely cute. And they will never take over the spice bush trees. We can share our bounty with them. It's a beautiful butterfly. Now, I want to mention 3 plants where that you can consume the tubers. That's the Sunchoke or Jerusalem artichoke. We gather the tubers, and they are more like rhizomes. You have to gather them in the winter, and they can be prepared in different recipes. We like to pickle them with Chinese sauce. And this is the plant growing on the right, growing in the fall with the beautiful flowers, attractive for pollinators again. Another tuber that we have actually tested, this plant was gathered, all these tuber groundnuts were gathered at Lincoln University. We grew them in a raised bed, and it was very productive. And we use just a raised bed media. They are naturally growing in woodlands. It's a nitrogen fixing legume, so it can be productive even if you don't add too much compost. And this is how the characteristic brace necklace like tubers attached from little rhizomes. You can use them in the recipes calling for potato, pretty widely spread on the eastern part of the country. And the last tuber I want to mention is wapato or arrowhead. It's also called duck potato because ducks eat them in the fall. And we are actually doing some research on this plant, and we found that they can be productive, but we just have obtained preliminary results. And we gathered from 3 plants about the most productive was had 50 bulbs, but we're gonna keep doing more research, and we'll share that later. This is a wetland plant, by the way, and we grow it in tubs to make it easy to harvest. Now, the last part of my presentation is I just want to share a few flowers. I thought it would be nice to show you the beautiful flowers at the end. Of course, violets and leaves have been eaten by Native Americans, by people around the world, and we can eat them here too. They're also host plants for the fritillary butterfly. And I use them to garnish baked goods. And this here with violets and also with black locust flowers. Both are produced in the spring. Another plant that I started growing just last year was woodland spiderwort. I found that the leaves are very tasty in salads, as well as the flowers. But this one, I go I don't gather too much because they're so gorgeous. I don't really use the flowers, but if I have plenty, why not? And this, I just want to finish with this plant that is so common across Missouri and across the states. Redbud is also an understory tree in natural areas, but the flowers are edible. And sometimes we don't know. We know it, but maybe we don't think about it. And so I just thought that it would be neat to show you. This is on the right is a picture of our native plant outdoor laboratory, but we have different species. Some that you see in the background are service berries. They're also edible. And right on the right of redbud, we have the two persimmon trees. And the whole area is planted with at least 100 species of native plants. We have lots of pollinators. So to end with my presentation, I'll give you references after this. It's just to show you how beautiful a salad can be just with native plants. I added one here. This is a nettle, dead nettle, that is a non-native species, but it's okay. It was growing in our yard. And we also add other annuals in our salad. Just add some salad dressing and then you're ready to eat. And the flowers add a sweetness to a salad. These are spiderwort leaves. And to complete my presentation, I just want to share some of the books I have. I counted the number of books I have, and I think I stop at 30. Every time I see in somewhere advertised a new book, I get it. Because nothing is perfect, not all are complete. You just have to have them, and they're fun. And I'm in the process of working on one by myself. I hope someday I can complete it. And this is just a list of references that will be available for you when you get to the recording again. And this is for you to, if you might be able to copy this out of this presentation. Otherwise, I will send it to you by email. If you send me a message, this is, as you can see, is what I have most of the plants that I talked to you about today, was not most, but some. And I included some information about us, as well as some information about the nutritional value of some of the plants. Unfortunately, with native plants, we don't have too much information about everything, but we're working on it. And with that, I think I will stop. If you, I'm gonna, I know that there are a few questions.
Mm-hmm. We do. So, we have some questions. Nadia, thank you. A wonderful presentation. Just more encouragement to help support the growth of native plants in your area and to make sure that we don't take over all the native spaces around us. We will be, when we get this question all the time, at the end of our presentations, we take the presentation and we turn it into a video. We then work on the closed caption to edit to make sure that everything comes out clear so people will be able to read it. And then we post it on our website in our Let's Talk Gardens video library. It takes us about 2 to 3 weeks. Zach is busy working on the last couple presentations that we did. But when we do that, we always put the resources up on that web page with the video that our speaker has been recommending. So you'll have access to that too. Just be patient. It takes us a while. Zach is learning more and more things about how you do all of the post-conditioning after a video is made. So thank you for your patience on that. But yes, we do have a lot of questions. One of my favorite was, Can you eat, you showed milkweed in one of the first pictures, but you didn't address milkweed. Can you eat the milkweed pods, or what part of the milkweed do you eat? Because we know the toxins in it help the monarch butterfly from being eaten by birds. So what do you eat?
My husband is a really adventurer, and,
Mm-hmm.
and he likes to eat almost everything in our yard. And I mean, the flowers and the pods are edible. And actually, because we have so many common milkweeds, we grow it in the front yard, and they propagate, as you know, from rhizomes. So we could gather some. So he prepared the flowers like cooking broccoli.
Oh, okay.
Eh,
Okay.
when you do mushrooms, like you just add butter and some spices, and that's it. And so it was really excuse me. So it's very, very flavorful, believe it or
Mm-hmm.
not, and it's fun to eat flowers. And the same with the pods. He actually eats the pods without cooking, but just in case somebody is allergic, I will
Right.
encourage to boil them
Yeah.
just briefly.
Yeah, yeah. I encourage everybody, no matter what you're trying for a new plant to be eaten, please try it out a little bit at a time. Nadia, you gave great advice to begin with. Make sure you know that really is the plant you think it is, and don't go out and start harvesting things and start eating them uh, without knowing what that plant is and without knowing how your body's going to react to that plant, because we know that our bodies don't all react to edibles the same way. So that's a really good point. And something popped up that's true. Many of these pods and stems, this is from your husband, he's commenting on you, must be eaten when they're young. And that's so true for pokeweed, for so many different things. Please follow the directions. We don't want you to get sick after trying some of these new things. Now, persimmon, I would say you would be fine. But many of the other things, uh, please be careful. Yes, and don't confuse ramps with lily of the valley. Lily of the valley is very poisonous. So that's really important to know you're eating exactly what you should be eating. So another one was, and this is good, I don't know the answer to this. Are wild plums susceptible to cedar apple rust? I don't think it is, but
Your apple rust, no.
yeah, the bite
They
host.
have
Yeah.
Yeah, you're a horticulturist, and you know that plants are susceptible to other diseases. They have the gum disease, and
Mhm.
also we have the fruits get I I forgot right now the diseases that they get. But my colleague here on campus, Sue, she what she does is that in order to avoid that, she prunes the trees
Mhm.
really well, because that's a good thing about plums. They usually grow and they develop into spigots, but if you want to grow them for production, it's important to prune them and then just keep one stem.
Right. I
And that
know the
helps.
non-native plums are susceptible to black knot fungus disease. So, we're learning as we go along, as we're starting to cultivate these plants more than just harvesting from the wild. So that's really important. Learn more about the plant. What is the best way to prune it? And I'm glad your university is doing that, and you have a whole lab that's being able to work on
Yeah,
learning more about these plants and introducing them. So that's great.
yeah, and actually the name came to me, brown rot
Brown rot,
is what we get.
yeah. Brown rot is very uh, usual amongst plums and other plants that are related to it. So, yeah,
Yeah,
but I don't know about cedar apple rust. That's a good one. We'll have to
I
do some investigation on that.
we
So, mhm.
when we have apples in at the finca, they are being destroyed because they are completely infected with the apple
Mhm.
rust, and we don't have problems with that in our plums.
Okay,
At least,
that's a good guide.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, we'll have to watch it. So when's the best time to harvest this? I always say Sumac. My
The
father
sumac,
introduced me. Yeah,
uh,
Sumac.
sumac is you have to keep an eye on them because the weather. We never know about the changes of the weather now. So like toward the end of the summer, when the fruits become really red, and then you can start tasting that tartness. Then they're ready to be harvested. Don't wait too long because there might be some rains that might wash that flavor. So instead of you using them, somebody down in the soil use it.
Right. And the berries actually they're hairy. And when they're hairy is the best time to harvest them. And so that hairiness, you want to you prepare it like Nadia says, but then I always strain it through cheesecloth so that I'm not eating the hairs because it can be itchy at times. So I would highly recommend harvest them when they're still hairy, put them in water to be able to condition them and extract the flavor from them, but then strain it through cheesecloth because you don't want a mouthful of little tiny hairs to go
Yeah,
along with it.
yeah, and it depends on the species because the ones
Right.
I don't have the problems with the ones we do here. Maybe because I don't know. It's just I use a strainer too. So, but it could be that people are allergic to
Yeah.
certain parts of the plant.
Yep. That's what I've always done. I guess I'm extra
Mhm.
precautious. Um, One question was asked, and I'm going to check with you because I heard this for so many years. Native persimmons lose their astringency after they have experienced a freeze. And what I explain is it's really not the freeze that's changing it. It's the fact that the seed is finally so mature that it's losing the astringency and telling the animals, okay, I'm okay to eat now. Go ahead. It just happens to correspond with time periods after a freeze. What have you heard?
Well, based on the experience we had at Lincoln and also at home, we have a couple persimmons. That's the case. For years, I wouldn't eat a persimmon if it was if I we didn't have a frost. But then one year they started growing. I mean, falling from the tree, and
Mm-hmm.
that's one tip for people. Don't gather them from the tree because they might still be not mature enough, and you would have an amazing experience
Yes.
for them because it's like eating. Well, there's no description. It's bad. So what you can do is just to be sure, let them go fall in the ground, and then try a little piece of the fruit just in case.
Yep.
But yes, it's not the frost thing. It's just a
Mm-mm.
myth.
Right.
Or we have find out that.
Right. Its stringency is there in the tannins, in many of the seeds, to be able to protect the plant from being eaten before the seeds are mature. So that's what you're just waiting for the fruit to be mature, which is so much fun. This is okay. Now I've got a cultivating ramps. That isn't a big question. So you're growing them at Lincoln University at your lab. How are you doing it? Because they're hard to cultivate.
Yeah, what we do is I show you some of the seedlings that we have grown from seed. The germination sometimes takes 18 months because they had to go through a period of warm, cold, and warm stratification. So if you want to overpass that first warm stratification, you can cheat it by use a growth chamber. And I actually use I'm using the hottest spot in my house to do the warm stratification, and then they go through the cold and again through the warms. But and they yes they are hard to germinate. But once you do that, I can guarantee you, even if you go through those 18 months, you would have results. And it's just an amazing sight to see your little ones
Yeah,
coming up.
that's
And
great.
another thing is that I mentioned that we have nurseries in Missouri. We can actually find all already mature plants, or they divide the plants and then we buy them. but they do it for commercially, of course. And Grow Native can, I mentioned Grow Native too, because it's an organization where you can find where the resources are. And
Excellent. That's good. Well, we're at time. I know we have more questions, but we're at time. So Nadia, I want to thank you. Excellent presentation. You have some big fans out there that have tuned in to help support you, and you didn't need support. You were excellent. You were great. So thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to working with you again because I want more information. This is when I retire, I'm going to grow all these things. And I'll be so excited.
Just let me know. I would love to talk more about native edibles, maybe in more detail.
Okay.
And thank you again.
We will do that. All right. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you,
Bye,
Zach, for
everyone.
providing help. Talk to y'all later. Bye-bye.
Bye.